Wanted to do a bit of a follow-up to the I'm Trapped series. Just a recommendation for anyone who is out there. If things are looking tough for you, if things are going downhill, maybe you've lost your job a week or two ago, there's nothing out there. Things are really looking rough. Don't if you're in that situation or you know it's coming, really seriously, don't just sort of stick your head in the sand and try to keep trying to live beyond your means by paying for a house that you can no longer afford in the economy in the state it is now. Apparently, according to George for Title, you can just stop paying your mortgage outright, and if you've got an all-right attorney and whatnot, you can actually string out living in there for sometimes 2 to 3 years. He's coming from Southern California, having been a former real estate agent himself. And that may be a viable option for you to get every dollar you can in cash and try to, even if your boss allows it to be paid in cash, and save as much as you can, for as long as you can. But if that's not really an option to you, or you're currently renting, or you got a mortgage that you're in but you don't really want any bankruptcy strikes against your name. I know it's not as bad to have bankruptcy written beside your name as it is here in Australia, because they're very unforgiving, the banks here, and the credit rating system is very harsh too over here. But having said that, never there seems to be this general consensus out there that by dropping your living standard, in terms of going from living in a house to living by some other means, as in going from a fully on-grid house in the suburbs or a fully on-grid apartment to living in a house off-grid as I do, living in a van as many people do, living in an RV. There's some sort of a assumption that you're going to be a loser because you've fallen behind the rest of the pack. And you once were great and then things were... Well, I can tell you right now, with the way the financial structure works in the Western world, with fiat currency and all these stock market and the booms and busts and all that sort of thing of the herd turning and the market just goes straight down the drain, and a lot of the other things like fractional reserve banking, if you understand what a flaming furphy all that sort of a system is, and it's like just the way it's all structured financially, and all that, and the way it runs is that you go through booms and busts, and obviously you're now in a pretty big bust. It might be a bust that is never really going to have another boom, but not in the way it has in the past anyway. But if you're worried about dropping behind the rest of the lot, also keep in mind that the rest of the lot are flaming hitting the wall and going into bankruptcy, businesses going into receivership, repossession. This is the norm, has been the norm over the last few years. And so if you think you're somehow going to be one of a kind and pointed out as a real loser if you lose your house, that's not the case, because so many people have. I'm told that 20% of houses in America are vacant. I'm also told that in some areas, 30 to 35% of some streets are vacant. Now, this isn't Detroit. Detroit is even worse. But, you know, this is places that were boom areas. There's 30 to 35% vacant houses in some streets in the right area or the wrong area. But all this stuff about sort of this consensus about somehow you're going to look like a dumbass, you're going to be a loser because you sort of don't have A, a house, and B, that house is connected to the grid. Stuff all that, you know, they can jam it up their butt. Quite simply, you don't need to live your life on the terms of what everybody else thinks is successful or not successful. I mean, you know, I've had a talk with people, you know, so many of them, as I've said before, have said to me they're stuck in this job, they've got no option. I knew a bloke who had a car that was like a 1970s model. It was a heap of crap. He said, you know, people used to say to him, why don't you get another car? I mean, the thing was so bad that chassis was cracked and it'd flex as he'd go up the into the backyard with it because he had to jump over a gutter to drive it into the backyard. And all that flexing of the cracked chassis is called the crack in the windscreen. And everyone's going, your car's absolutely buggered, why don't you get another one? He just said, I don't have the money. Me personally, my car cost $9,000, I paid in cash. Now it's worth about $6,000. If I flipped that thing on its roof, I'd go buy another car tomorrow. Just go buy another one tomorrow, just like that, no big deal. And if people are going to start, you know, pointing fingers about success and not success and their view of having made it or being a loser, you know, that's all good and well. But where I come from and the thinking that I've developed is I would rather have all my bills paid and have money in the bank and have a standard of living that isn't 100% convenient, but rather a well set up off-grid house that's 95% convenient, you know, and live with, you know, I've got a bit of a mouse problem here and things like that. And I'd rather live with a mouse problem under not so glorious, you know, housing condition, you know, as in the house doesn't look like $1 million. And I'd rather live like that and have money in my pocket and all my bills covered than be like some other people I know who, one lot I heard of, had a nice house in a nice suburb and they had to go out and buy curtains and they're trying to get the curtains on credit. And you know why? Because they had to keep the curtains closed all day because they were so broke from paying the mortgage that they had no furniture and they needed to close the curtains so the neighbours didn't realise that they didn't have tables and chairs inside the house or a couch or anything like that. The only reason I didn't have a couch, actually, I had like 2 or 3 of them. They're lovely couches too. I just didn't have enough room, so I had to burn them, which was a real shame. They have genuine leather. That was a shame. Anyway, you know, keep in mind that just having a house on the grid, if it's crippling you financially to do that, don't be afraid to take a step back and live in a van so you can be like me, so that if things do go a bit AWOL, you know, you're still liquid, you've still got money in your hand. Because it's better to have money in your hand and live in a van than have no furniture, no money, and be living from week to week to maintain your mortgage on your house in suburbia. So keep that in mind, you know. It's sort of, that's the way I think and have thought for a long time, and I think it's a good way of looking at things, you know, because quite simply, I'll live within my means and I've got money to spare, and it's so much better than living beyond your means. And, you know, the way the job market is, it's not your fault individually. Of course, it's not your fault the way it is now with the economy and all that. So, I mean, you know, don't feel embarrassed, because all this fear of what your friends think is one of the biggest things that will keep you financially entrapped in something that, quite frankly, you may not be able to afford.